Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for January 31st, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Campbell, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant,
Here.
Garrett, Hawk, Hicks, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any personal orders or announcements? Personal orders or announcements? Representative McKenzie, did you have a...
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to acknowledge the board and staff, a few of the members of the board, the director staff of the ORNL Federal Credit Union, who's in town for the league conference down the hill this week. So I'd like to acknowledge them, of which I am a member.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining us. Before we begin our hearing today, we're going to be hearing from the Division of TennCare. We're going to be talking about the re-enrollment of for TennCare candidates across the state. But I want to take just a few minutes to review some committee matters for our going forward, so everybody will understand what our plans are and how we will conduct business. First of all, I want to thank you all, the committee members, for your participation and your attendance during our early budget hearings a few weeks ago. We will begin the remainder of our budget hearings next Wednesday, February the 8th. Next Wednesday, we will start our marathon. We hope to conclude by Wednesday, March 8th. That's a very ambitious schedule with long periods of budget hearings, and I ask in advance for your attendance and your attention. It's really important. We have these hearings. We ask these departments and agencies to come before us. It's our opportunity to really drill down. And when we get to the end of this session, which hopefully end of April, we're shooting for, when we get to the end of this session and we're making final budget decisions, then the information that you've gathered from these agencies and departments will be really critical in helping us make good decisions. So again, I would ask that you be courteous and give your attention to the presenters and their staffs. And again, just remember, it is important. Hopefully you asked to serve on finance and weren't voluntold. So part of being a finance member is being present, particularly for these budget hearings. So with that little carrot and stick, I'll just go over a few policies and procedures of the committee. Bill notices and amendments. I think most of you are aware that all the notices and proposed amendments have to be submitted electronically now. They must be filed with the full committee through the corresponding Outlook distribution list. And this process is going to automatically request a fiscal memo on your behalf, so you don't have to do that separately. As in the past, this committee does not accept verbal amendments. And the deadline to submit proposed committee amendments is Monday at 10 o'clock. We have a committee rule about local bills, particularly we have some new members, so I want to make sure that they all understand that. For any local bills that have a local fiscal impact, we're only going to consider those bills if they are sponsored or co-sponsored by a representative from that locality. If a representative brings a local bill for a locality that he or she does not represent, we're not going to consider it until we have someone signed on who actually does represent that locality. You can roll your bill to make that happen, but that uses up one of your rolls. So I would suggest if you happen to be carrying a bill like that, that you make sure you have a local representative signed on beforehand. Testimony in committee. We do sometimes have testimony before finance. Our guest speakers need to be submitted to my office no later than 24 hours prior to the scheduled meeting. We'll make every effort to accommodate that testimony when we can, but sometimes according to schedule, we may or may not be able to do that. And we do reserve the right to put time limits on testimony and comments. Electronic devices, I know I don't have to tell this committee that, but please be respectful of other committee members, of the presenters, those who are watching at home and online, and silence your electronic devices before we start our committee meeting, please. And pursuant to House Rule Number 2, just a reminder, no member or staff member of the House of Representatives shall record or live stream the proceedings of the House Committee. These proceedings are already recorded. They are live streamed. Anybody in Tennessee or anywhere else can look at this anytime they choose. So for that reason, we do not need anybody else doing that recording. So with that, if anybody wants to look at these rules, we'll be happy to share copies of those. If you have questions, just let me know. But we're not going to take the time to introduce ourselves. This is a large committee. Most of us know each other, have worked together for a long time. But I do want to recognize new members to the committee. Those include Representative Barrett. When I say your name, just raise your hand. Chairman Boyd is new to this committee as well. Assistant Leader Cochran. Chairman Kiesling is new to our committee. Assistant Leader Love. Representative McKenzie. Chairman Moon, and Representative Parkinson, who I don't believe has joined us as yet. But welcome to the new members. I also like to introduce our committee staff. We have our House Budget Director and the brains of the outfit, Jessica Himes. Behind us there, Fiscal Review Director, Crystal Lee Karsner. We have our attorneys, Joel Hayes, Doug Garrett. We have a law clerk working with us this session, Caroline Preston. So welcome, Caroline. My administrative assistant is Taylor Aliff. I think most of you have met her and know her by now. Our research analyst for this committee, Mirna Tunish and Dakota Gordon. Dakota is also, he's new with us. You might have missed Tanner Poss, who has served this committee ably in the past. The speaker went and poached him. And but we're delighted to have Dakota join our happy band. My intern this year is Kathleen Kiesel. She's a student at Belmont University. House Clerk Caitlin Coulter and Will Mansfield. Our librarian archives, Andrew Hoffman, and our Sergeant at Arms, who keeps this unruly crowd tamped down, is Tony Townsend. So we welcome all of you and thank you for the work that you have already done and will be doing for this committee. Together, I think we have some new team members, but we have a core group that have been with us for a while. I think that we have done some good work in the past. I believe we can do some good work going forward. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to chair this committee and to work with each of you all so that we can make sure that the Tennessee taxpayers' dollars are used in the most effective way possible. So I thank you again in advance for the work that will be done to make sure that that will happen. So enough of my blathering. At this point, we are going to ask our TennCare folks to come forward, and we're going to move on with the stated purpose of our meeting today. And without objection, we are out of session. So I want to welcome Director Smith and staff members. Ask you, Director Smith, if you would introduce yourself and your staff, or have them introduce themselves, however you would like to do it. And then again, members, what we're here to discuss with TennCare today, I think all of you know that there's a re-enrollment process that will be happening this year. Anybody that is now currently on TennCare will have to be revalidated and recertified to be TennCare eligible. So I think as members with constituents, all of us who have a number of constituents who are on TennCare, I think we want to make sure that we understand what the process is. So when we start getting calls from our constituents, we'll be able to answer those questions and just to do all that we can to make it as painless a process as possible. So Director Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and members. It's good to be with you all this afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Stephen Smith. I serve as the TennCare Director. To my left is Kim Hagan. She is our Director of Member Services. And to my right is Zane Seals. He is our Chief Financial Officer. As the chairman said, we've been asked to provide an update on the TennCare renewal process, and the timing for this committee is actually really good, as we just got some certainty and some news and action from the federal government around this process and when it actually is going to begin. And we've gotten that certainty for the first time in 3 years. On the front end here, I do want to acknowledge that this renewal process will be a substantial undertaking for Tennessee and every Medicaid program throughout the country. We haven't done this in 3 years, and so that creates some complexities for both our agency and also for the members that we serve. But I can say with every confidence that Tennessee is well positioned to go through this process. We are as prepared as we can be from a systems standpoint, and we are in a good place financially due to some very sound decision-making by the executive branch and the legislative branch, and we remain very appreciative of that partnership. We've been asked to keep this to a reasonable amount of time, so I'm gonna go through this very quickly, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end to get to your questions. I do want to start by giving some background on redetermination itself. This is not new to us. It's not new to Medicaid. It's required by both federal and state law, and it's a process that confirms eligibility for TennCare. It's a process that, absent extreme circumstances, is required each year, and we are prohibited from maintaining enrollment for anyone that does not verify eligibility requirements have been met. I mentioned extreme circumstances because we have actually experienced extreme circumstances over the last 3 years, which have thrown a wrench into this annual process and the requirements. In January of 2020, of course, the federal government issued a public health emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that declaration included a continuous enrollment provision. That means that the Medicaid annual redeterminations and therefore removal of any members from the TennCare program have been paused for 3 years now. Medicaid programs throughout the country have been pressing the federal government to give us some certainty around this continuous enrollment requirement because the lack of certainty has created challenges both from a program planning perspective, but also from a budget perspective. Fortunately, in December, Congress acted and decoupled the continuous enrollment provision from the public health emergency and set April 1st as the end of the continuous enrollment requirement, meaning that this process must begin. Here you will see a graph that shows the impact of this continuous enrollment provision. As you can see, it's pretty substantial. To date, we have increased our membership by about 22%. That's more than 300,000 members since the start of the pandemic. That means that we will have more than 1.7 million members that will have to go through this process for the first time in 3 years. And for some of our members, they will be going through this process for the very first time. So what happens next? As I mentioned earlier, we have been preparing for this for some time, not knowing when the PHE, the public health emergency, would end or when the continuous enrollment provision would end. We developed a 4-part plan. Those 4 parts are planning, education, renewals, and then departures. And of course, each of those parts includes multiple components to better ensure that we have clarity and that we have responsiveness. Now, with the date certain that has been provided by Congress, we will really kick things into high gear. And with a caveat that the federal government could always throw a wrinkle into this with some unreasonable or unclear guidance or expectations, we are optimistic about where we are and where we are going. I can say this without hesitation. It has never been easier to renew TennCare coverage if renewal is desired. I've said many times, including in this committee, that there really is a dual responsibility when it comes to redetermination. There is a responsibility on TennCare members to update their addresses with TennCare and to respond to communication that they receive from TennCare. That is the only way that we can verify eligibility for many of our members, and it's the only way that we can legally renew them. And then the other responsibility is on us at TennCare, and that responsibility is to make this process as easy and as user-friendly as possible. And that's what we've been working really hard to do over the last couple of years, and that's what we're going to continue to do. I hope when we get into the questions, we can provide more detail on these 4 parts. But for now, I'll say this. We have significantly ramped up our communication efforts with our members as well as our providers and our stakeholders in an effort to notify members about what is about to occur and to ensure that we have all of the current updated information from them. We've also strongly encouraged our members to open TennCare Connect accounts so that we don't have to rely solely on the physical mailing address. In addition, we've taken advantage of one-time flexibilities from the federal government that will allow us to renew the maximum number of individuals automatically using other available data sources, such as SNAP and TANF data. The system really is designed in every way for members to maintain enrollment if they maintain eligibility status. And then for those that are determined ineligible, we will transfer that information to the federal insurance marketplace where affordable plans exist for many. I want to circle back to this, this slide and give you all our best projection for what things will look like when we get through this process. As you saw previously, we are currently at about 1.74 million members. We project that we will peak in the next couple of months at just slightly under 1.8 million, and then we will gradually decline as this process starts. Our best projection is that ultimately we will end up where we were prior to the pandemic. But in full transparency, we don't know, and we won't know until we go through this process and we actually see who is eligible and who is not, and who participates in the process and who does not. One thing to note here is that pre-pandemic, we were actually still trending down in our enrollment, which means we never really hit that normal enrollment number for TennCare. So we can't be absolutely certain about where we will end up, but we can be certain that we're going to go through this process in a reasonable and responsible manner. Now, obviously, this enrollment increase has budget implications, but as I stated earlier, we are in a good position, and our reserve includes funding to meet our projected obligations. As we've talked about many times, during the emergency, the federal government has been providing Medicaid programs with an enhanced federal match, and that match is to address the increased cost from the membership increase. Per the recent action by Congress, that enhanced match will be phased down over the course of this calendar year, and you can see the phase down on the screen. Our estimated non-recurring cost to cover the increased membership through the redetermination process is approximately $500 million. And the good news here is that we have those funds in our reserve, and again, we're well positioned to see this through. Madam Chairman, I know that was very quick, but that completes our prepared remarks, and we're happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you, Director. We do have some questions. I'm going to start. If you could go back to the graph that shows that one. Thank you. So for the next couple of months, people will continue to be added on to TennCare through the regular process. As we start this re-enrollment, am I given to understand how that graph is going down at a gradual basis, so it's not going to be like everybody's going to be cut off on May 31st, 2024. Some people will be removed or added prior to that. And how is that determined?
Right. So I may have Kim jump in here, but high level, we have 12 months to go through this process. And so we will have, for the most part, equal numbers of individuals that will be going through each month. And at the same time, we'll have people that will still be applying and coming onto the program. So it'll be a very gradual decline. Kim, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure.
Help me understand, how do you know who's going to be in the first month? How are you going to incrementally divide the enrollees?
Sure, sure. So Kim Hagan, Director of Member Services, again, thanks for the question. We have kept renewal dates in our system throughout these 3 years. And so every month we have essentially picked up everyone who should be going through renewal in that particular month and moved them out about a year. It took us a few months to get there, but now we're really just moving people out a year. And so we have decided to leave that distribution alone. So it should follow, for someone who came on a year ago, their renewal date should be a year later. And so we've decided just to pick people up where their renewal dates naturally follow. With a few exceptions, but for the most part, that's what we'll do. And they will be divided over the 12 months. So each monthly cohort will get chosen, and they will first go through an ex parte or an auto renewal process where we hit data sources and try to reapprove them based on the data we have, or the fact that they're receiving SNAP or TANF. And then for those who cannot be reapproved, then we will send them a renewal packet, and we'll either send that through the mail if they've chosen to receive mail communications, or electronically if they've actually chosen to receive electronic notifications. And then that process varies per person. The renewal packets are due back in 40 days, and those can be returned any number of ways. Someone could complete it via mail and submit it back to us. They could go online through TennCare Connect, and they'll be presented with all of the data we have, and we'll just have to flip through the screens and correct anything that may be wrong. They can renew on the phone by calling our TennCare Connect call center. You can go to any DHS county office and submit their paperwork there, and DHS will get it to us. And so depending on when someone returns that information, then we look at it, we make a decision. We may need more information. If we do, then they'll have 20 days to submit that verification, which can also be submitted various ways. It can be uploaded through TennCare Connect. They can mail it, they can fax it, they can drop it off at DHS. They could use our TennCare Connect app to take a picture of their pay stubs, let's say, if that's what we need. And then if someone is determined ineligible, they will then receive a 20-day advance termination. So you can see how it'll be gradual depending on when someone responds during the process.
But if we have a constituent who questions, when their particular situation would be reviewed, then we can tell them it was be dependent in the same month that they were originally added to TennCare, and their 12-month renewal would be automatically coming up. So
for the most part, but by April, we will have renewal dates in the TennCare Connect online system, so they could log on and they'll be able to see when their upcoming date is.
all right, thank you very much. Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Smith, for sharing your comments with us. I think we're all interested in learning more about this process. You mentioned that under normal circumstances, I guess when we're not in a public health emergency, recipients are required to renew annually. But I guess it's correct that individuals can apply for TennCare anytime during the year, and they also are obligated to report back to you if they experience some kind of change in circumstance before that one-year renewal date, if their income went up in a way that would make them ineligible. Is that understanding right?
That is correct. That's absolutely correct. Now, the reality is sometimes that doesn't happen. If there is a change in circumstance, we don't always get that reported, but that is supposed to be reported. You're correct about that.
I know you serve different populations like pregnant women and children. I think a lot of us think of the population that's low income, where there's some kind of an income threshold where you can't have income above a certain level. Seems like it's often reported as a percent of the poverty level, like 100% of the poverty level. Could you summarize for us what the income criteria typically is for TennCare, And I guess let us know whether that has changed during the public health emergency and I guess after the public health emergency ends.
Yeah. Well, I can say that the income criteria has not changed during the public health emergency, except that no one is being removed. And so, whereas before they would have gone through an annual redetermination process, and if their incomes exceeded the limits, they would have no longer have been eligible. They've been able to stay on. We are a traditional Medicaid program, which means that we're covering primarily children. We're covering pregnant women. We're covering parents and caretaker relatives, and then we're covering disabled and then elderly. The income limits vary based on the category. So, for example, for a child that's 0 to age 1 on the Medicaid side, it would be about 200%. But then we also have a Cover Kids program, which increases that to 250%. For children ages 1 through 5, really for children, I guess you could look at it as up to 250% of poverty because we have the Cover Kids in addition to TennCare. For a pregnant woman, it's about 200%. For the adult caretaker relative, it's actually based on a dollar amount, but with the recent changes in the poverty guidelines, we're currently sitting at about 84% of poverty for the adult caretaker relative category. And then some of the disabled populations, it's not necessarily tied to the poverty level. It's tied to a specific dollar amount per month.
Okay, and it sounds like these income thresholds where they exist, they didn't change during the public health emergency. People just had their care extended, but the program didn't become, it didn't increase eligibility by allowing folks with higher incomes into the program.
That's right.
I guess last question, were there any criteria, any eligibility criteria that were changed during the public health emergency that are going to be reverted back, I guess, in April?
I don't think we changed any. No, Representative, I'm not aware of any criteria that would have changed in terms of income criteria that would have changed that we're now going to, revert at the end of the pen.
Just going back to annual recertifications.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
thank
right.
you.
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Director Smith, again, it's already been said. Thank you for being here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't begin by saying I see Miss Ashley Reed back behind you, and I want to thank her publicly because she's always very timely whenever I give her a call with my constituents. So I do want to give her a shout out.
Yeah,
You mentioned the PHE, and of course, yesterday there was an announcement by the Biden administration that the PHE was going to be extended out until May the 11th. Tell me, how does that affect your timeline?
Yeah, it really doesn't, because once Congress decoupled the continuous enrollment provision from the PHE, that really kind of separated us. It was no longer dependent on that. So really no impact on us.
Okay. So let's say an enrollee gets disenrolled, so they get taken off. How much time has to pass before they can try to re-enroll, when they can reapply?
They can actually reapply at any time. And I think that's a really good point. Even if, for whatever reason, the member does not respond and is removed from the program, that individual can reapply at any time. There's no open enrollment period. So in Medicaid, that individual can apply at any time. And if it's a child or a pregnant woman, then if they are deemed eligible, it's retroactive 90 days from the date of application. If it's not one of those categories, it's retroactive to the date of application. And so that's an important factor when we're thinking about people that may be impacted negatively that are still eligible from an income standpoint.
And then thank you for that. Then you mentioned earlier about that the many different ways that someone can, I guess, enter their information. Of course, in my neck of the woods up in the 9th District, one thing that I worry about is a lot of folks are going to be contacting you guys by phone. They just don't have the means necessary to get online, to be able to fill out an account and to register online. So, and I guess maybe a little of this comes from just getting out of the pandemic and a little bit of PTSD with unemployment. But are you guys ready to handle the amount of calls that you guys are going to be receiving? Because you're going to be receiving them.
Appreciate the question. We feel like we are in a good position. It certainly is going to be challenging. You all were very helpful to us in this last budget cycle. You gave us some temporary positions for this very thing. But we are going to have to hire some individuals. And as you mentioned, it is becoming more and more difficult to do so. But we do feel good about the position that we're in. And we think that the fact that we have 12 months to go through this process, we think that we'll be in good shape.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Lady.
Next on my list, Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me expound a little bit on where Chairman Hicks was going. We are looking at new employees or extending some employees within TennCare, but tell me about our partnerships with the Department of Human Services. Are we going to have kiosks in these buildings? Are there going to be opportunities for individuals to not only have face-to-face conversations with Department of Human Services, and are they ready? I don't see anyone, and maybe there is somebody in the room with DHS, but tell me about those partnerships and any electronic availability that we might have within those offices in each county.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'll take this one. There are kiosks in every DHS county office where someone could use a computer to respond through a TennCare Connect account. There are also phones if they need to go there and use a phone to call in. DHS is going to be partnering with us to help people. Let's say they bring a paper renewal packet in and need help getting it to us, then they will assist that person in getting it to us. Or if they just need help, completing the data, then they'll provide that assistance. One thing that I'm working with DHS to do is for every monthly cohort of people who actually get a renewal packet, I'll be giving them a list so they sort of know by zip code what to expect and which counties may be impacted most with foot traffic.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as you're talking about the renewal dates, we've discussed that quite a bit as well. Tell me a scenario in which a person might be renewed or, might be reviewed outside their natural renewal dates. We mentioned some scenarios, some income situations, and can you give me some
Sure,
what-if scenarios?
For example, our long-term care population, maybe who are in a nursing home or receiving HCBS services, we have divided those out over the whole 12 months. So if they naturally would have occurred, in fewer months than 12, we've spread them out so that, because that's going to be a higher touch population. And so we want our partners who'll be working with them to have availability to provide that assistance. There is a small population who was converted into our TED system and never went through renewal and has never had any contact with us since that system went live in early 2019. They're going to be front loaded. It's something that we worked with comptrollers auditors several years ago.
Chairman Hawk.
And thank you. Just a final follow-up and more a history lesson. I'm going to miss dealing with you guys on a daily basis as I move to another committee, and I know Ashley probably won't miss working with me as much as we were. But I always like to give folks a perspective. In its origination, the TennCare program was built around serving 1 in 6 Tennesseans. As we increased and the woodworking effect came about several years ago with the Affordable Care Act and other issues have come up, we're serving 1 in 5 Tennesseans now, where we're projecting to be in November of 2025 is going to be that 1 in 5 Tennesseans. We're far above that now, serving almost 1.8 million individuals right now. So before the headline gets out there that TennCare cuts 400,000 people from the TennCare rolls, there's certain procedures and policies that go into effect. And the way TennCare is structured is essentially to serve that 1 in 5 population, which is that 1.4 million Tennesseans, just to put a fine number on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Director team. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the auto renewal process, but I'll come back to that. Can you give just a quick update on the block grant program, where we stand on? I haven't heard that mentioned much, and that drew a smile. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Yeah.
just a quick update if you could, please.
That's one of our favorite subjects. We so we've completed our second year under the waiver. It's kind of hard to believe, but 21 was the first year, calendar year 21, and the calendar year 22 is the second year. We are very optimistic that we will soon be able to secure our shared savings from year one. So stay tuned on that. But we've had tremendous success with this waiver. Last year, we were able to significantly enhance benefits and services with your approval, and we also were able to add members that were in need, particularly those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we are in a good place. As you all may recall, the Biden administration raised some concerns with the waiver, and they asked us to consider submitting some amendments. We took a look at that, and we felt like we could do that to secure some finality and to get through the full 10 years of the waiver. The core principles of the waiver remained, and the number one core principle being able to get those shared savings and be rewarded for our strong management of the program. So that will remain. The one piece that we did have to give on was the closed formulary, which is something that we had not implemented, the closed drug formulary. But we've had good discussions with the team at CMS, and we think that we're very close to finalizing that. But I think some people think that we're waiting on approval from CMS to be able to implement the waiver. That's not true. We got approval from the prior administration, and it was never suspended. So we're full steam ahead, and we're in a really good place.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to make sure I understand, I mean, this, because I was actually served under Chairman Hawk when we walked through this and passed that a couple of years ago. But so this is rewarding our fiscal responsibility. It's allowing us to enhance services and allowing us to really be flexible with our enrollment, because we're managing in more of a Tennessee way versus with the strings required from the federal government. Is that a correct, pretty fair assessment?
Yeah, I would completely agree. And the main point there is, whereas before our strong management, efficient operations, that was resulting in a benefit to Washington, where the dollars just sort of get lost. Now, for the first time, we're going to be able to share in those savings and keep those dollars here in Tennessee and reinvest them back into the program.
Outstanding. That's encouraging. Madam Chair, if I may just quickly.
Certainly.
Related to the auto renewal process, can you just provide us some details related to that? And I know some packets are going to go out if there's not that opportunity available. What happens if the packets can't be returned? If you can just kind of summarize that, please, for us.
Why don't you take it?
Sure. So every month we will start with an auto renewal batch, essentially, where we will hit IRS data or unemployment data, labor wage data. And now, because CMS has offered these one-time waivers, we will also hit SNAP and TANF enrollment. And we will use that information to say, okay, this member still groups in their eligibility category, and based on this data, their income is below the threshold. And so therefore they should be reapproved. And so anyone who can be reapproved through the auto renewal process will simply get a letter saying, congratulations, you've been reapproved. Your coverage will continue until you hear from us again. And that'll be it for that person. Their renewal date will then push out a year. If you cannot be auto-renewed, and auto-renew can only be used for positive decisions. And so if you cannot be renewed, then we will send a renewal packet, like I said, either by mail or electronic through an electronic notification if you've set up a TennCare Connect account and chosen to receive electronic notifications. We will also, for the first time this time, we'll be sending a 1 or 2 page, a small letter in between the auto renewal process and sending the renewal packet, just to give people a heads up that the packet's coming. It's smaller, so if someone has a mailbox issue, it'll fit in, and it'll just say the packet is coming. If you don't get it in the next week, you need to call us, reach out to us, because we want you to engage to make sure that you don't run the risk of losing coverage. And then, like I said before, the packet will be due in 40 days, whichever means the person wants to respond. And then if we need additional information, a verification or proof of something, then the person will have 20 days to respond to that request. And then if determined ineligible, or if they don't respond or don't engage at all, there'll be a 20-day advance termination notice sent with appeal rights. And then like before the pandemic, if the person doesn't respond, doesn't engage, and during the 90 days after termination, they realize they've lost coverage and they either reapply or return the information that they did not return earlier, and they're reapproved, then we'll fill in any gap in coverage, so that if they have bills during that time, they can get reimbursed.
Thank you. It was a very thorough explanation. Thank you. It was good. Thank you, Director, for your leadership. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just to follow up on something that you mentioned there, what is the appeals process? If someone is denied TennCare coverage, they're not re-enrolled, but they feel that denial has happened in error, then what is the process to appeal?
Sure. So they could call or write to us. There's a form online that they could use, or they can just call our call center and file an appeal. And the way that process works is the first thing we do is we take a look ourselves to see did an error occur in the processing, something that we could fix to change the outcome. If not, then the appeal moves on and goes to a hearing before an administrative judge.
Thank you. Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming today. I think starting in July 23 through June 24, CMS is going to start requiring us to report data as it relates to those folks that are eligible, those who are terminated, procedurally why they were terminated from TennCare and those kinds of things. I guess the question is, I think there's even a possibility of fines, civil penalties if you don't do that. Obviously, we've talked a little bit today about, the changes that we're going to see over the coming year. I guess in that instance, are you prepared, or how have you prepared to be able to do that reporting? How does it have to be done? Is it on a monthly basis or those kinds of things? Just quick question on that.
Sure. So there are several reporting requirements during this unwinding period. And I think the one you're referring to is we'll have to submit baseline data March 8th. And then on the 8th of every month thereafter, we'll have to submit data, really just a running tally of how many people in the last month were renewed, how many people were approved, how many were terminated, what type of termination, how many appeals. Very, very rich data requests that we're prepared to respond to CMS.
I'm sorry, Chair Lady. Do you expect to need any more staff to do that, or is it unusual? Is that data readily available, or it just seems like a lot of detailed information about over 1.5 million Tennesseans?
Yeah. So we have developed, based on the guidance CMS has provided on how the data needs to be pulled, we have already developed the reports. So they'll be automated coming out of our eligibility determination system. So I think we're in a good place. I mean, so we just need a person who
Right.
will input the data from that's produced from our TED system into the system that CMS wants us to input it into.
Thank you. Final two-part question. Is that information that you can share with the legislature as it relates to how you're winding down, as it relates to kind of a progress report?
Absolutely. In fact, I think we have to post it on our website. Maybe not.
don't-
We
we
have,
don't
we have
ha-
to
we don't
submit
have
it. We have
to,
to
but-
submit it to CMS, and we'll of course we will get that to you.
The reason for the question is it seems like a really good measuring stick as it relates to our progress on a monthly basis as to whether we're making progress or sorting out the challenges associated with it. But thank you for answering my question.
Representative Miller, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and thank you all. On slide 6, you've actually answered pretty much all the questions I may have had, but looking at that slide and just based on your answers from other members, almost see it as a mountain going up a mountain, and you at that peak, and all of a sudden you just tumble off, you roll off, and you're at the bottom again. Try to better explain to me again, how did you all come up with these projections again, that it's going to be that many individuals based on where we are now
Mhm.
that possibly
Yeah.
would no longer be on TennCare?
Appreciate the question. It's a good question, and what we've said all along is that there's no way that we can project this with certainty. All we can do is give our best projection, and our best projection is that when we get, I mean, we're talking about all the way through November of 25, and so our best projection is that we will be back to where we were pre the continuous enrollment requirement. And part of the reason for that is because we were still trending down before the pandemic started. But to your point, we really don't know until we get through this process. We get asked all the time, well, what's your best projection? And this is our best projection.
Madam Chair Lady.
Representative Miller?
So when you're balancing the scales based on eligibility, the biggest question is income changes. Give me an idea of how your income could change by maybe a dollar amount that would make the difference between you're on TennCare and now you're no longer on TennCare.
Well, for the most part, it's going to be based on the federal poverty
Okay.
level. And so there's a dollar amount that's associated with that. And then, so of course, if you rise above that, then you would no longer be eligible for TennCare. There's got to be a cutoff for every category. I think one important thing to note is that in a normal world, people come on TennCare and they come off TennCare every month. And because of this continuous enrollment provision, no one has been coming off, but people have still been coming on. And so when we talk about going from 1.78 down to 1.4, it doesn't mean that everybody that's come on since the pandemic started is now going to come off. It's not necessarily the same people. It just is going to be dependent upon that income eligibility and the category eligibility.
Okay. Madam Chair,
Representative Miller?
one last question. Open enrollment, and you've set up all avenues, giving people opportunities to participate. And I've heard it and I've heard that. The current providers, TennCare, are they participating at all in the open enrollment? And if they are, how are they participating?
Yes, I want to commend our TennCare providers because they have been great partners with us in trying to get the word out on this and communicating with our members because it's in both of our interests to maintain eligibility for those that are truly eligible. We want every TennCare member that is eligible to stay on the program if they want to stay on the program. But part of being eligible is you have to prove that you meet the income requirements, and you have to prove that you meet the category requirements. And that's just state law and it's federal law. And we really have no wiggle room on that.
Thank you.
Representative Shaw, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director King. I want to commend you. You've been dealing with TennCare for a long time. You've done a great job over the years. Complexity of the program. You must have some good employees.
The best. We've got the best.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I've been listening carefully. So if a person just for some reason requalifying, they qualified, but they miss it, they just didn't do it, or are they penalized in any way for getting back on when you go through this process?
No, sir, not at all. There's no penalty whatsoever. That individual could reapply, and if eligible, could be right back on the program.
Okay. So then it's just a matter of communicating, getting that information out. And Ashley, I'm sure you're gonna get a lot of calls, for sure. But I thank you for what you've done with the program. I'm hoping that this is something that will be successful, because TennCare has been very vital to the people that we serve, and hopefully we can keep this line of communication open, whereby we can all participate in helping to make this progress. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Director, I just want to clarify a follow-up with Representative Shaw, 'cause what I think I heard earlier was for other than pregnant women and another category, children, I believe, that was retroactive for
for pregnant women and children, it would be retroactive 90 days.
90 days. But if
Everyone else, date of application.
So if there could be some period of time, if someone was disenrolled from TennCare and didn't reapply, there could be some period of time where they would not have that coverage, and that it's not going to be backfilled, or is not going to be retroactive in that case.
That's
It's
right.
only to the date.
That's
of
right. And
application.
with the caveat, though, that if someone comes off, if within the next 90 days they reapply and are eligible, then it would go back the
Okay.
90 days.
So they do have a 90-day window. I think that's a critical point that I'm not sure I certainly understood from before. So, because, inevitably, no matter how much we try to communicate and through all avenues, and I'm glad to hear that you say that the TennCare providers are part of this communication process. There are going to be some folks who are going to wake up without coverage and not realize what happened, and so that's good to know. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, can you go back to slide 6, please? I kind of want to piggyback off what my colleague from Shelby County was asking about. Who determines, or is the threshold, the income threshold changing that's going to cause this drop? Or tell me, just the drop part, how are we getting there?
Yeah.
What's the reason that we're actually losing people off the rolls?
So no income requirements are changing. That'll all stay the same. The reason why we will have the drop is because for the past 3 years, no one has gone through the process. So we haven't been determining whether someone meets the income requirements. And so in a typical year, you will have people come off and come on every month. For the past 3 years, we've only had people come on and no one has been coming off. So when you restart the process, for the first time, you're going to have people coming off.
And
Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we're restarting the process because we were under the federal protocol for COVID. Is that what? Okay. Okay. I'm much more clear. Let me ask one more question. Is it through CMS? Are there possibilities for enrollment criteria being adjusted for specific areas? Let's say for mental health only. Is that a possibility? Could our state request a waiver for just specifically mental health and changing the enrollment criteria for that?
I think we could. We have an 1115 waiver, and so that gives us some flexibilities, and so we could always ask. The worst thing they could do is say no. But there are options and states that have done things like that.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Seeing none, thank you all.
Thank you.
And we know this is going to be a big deal for 1.8 million Tennesseans. So we appreciate the effort that's going into making sure it's as seamless and as painless a process as possible, recognizing there will be bumps in the road. That's inevitable. But thank you for having a plan to work through those.
Yeah. Thank you.
We are back in session, and without objection, we are adjourned.